It was a routine winter evening in Kathmandu, Nepal. Indian Airlines flight IC-814, an Airbus A300, was preparing to depart for its scheduled journey to Delhi, India. The plane was filled with 176 passengers, excited to reach home for the holiday season. At 4:10 p.m. local time, the flight took off smoothly from Tribhuvan International Airport, unaware that this journey would become one of the darkest chapters in Indian aviation history. As the flight reached its cruising altitude, the cabin crew began their routine duties. The flight steward walked into the cockpit to serve tea to the pilots. Moments later, as he exited the cockpit, his cheerful demeanor frozen. Standing in the aisle was a masked man pointing a gun directly at him. Before the steward could react, the hijacker forced his way into the cockpit, brandishing his weapon. Inside the cockpit, chaos unfolded as the hijacker ordered the captain to divert the plane to Lahore, Pakistan. Meanwhile, 4 other hijackers emerged in the cabin, terrifying passengers with threats of explosives. The hijackers warned that they would detonate the aircraft. Captain Devi Sharan, maintaining his composure, tried to reason with the hijackers, explaining that the plane did not have enough fuel to fly directly to Lahore. The hijackers dismissed his concerns, forcing him to head westwards. As the captain reluctantly changed course, he managed to discreetly alert air traffic control of the hijacking. The hijacking came at a particularly tense time for India and Pakistan, following the recent Kargil War earlier that year. The strained relations between the two nations played a significant role in the decisions made during the hijacking. When IC-814 approached Lahore, Pakistani authorities denied the plane permission to land, even shutting down their airspace. Desperation gripped the cockpit as the fuel levels dropped. With no choice but to land, Captain Sharan directed the plane to Amritsar, India, pleading with the ATC for an emergency refueling. Despite landing, the hijackers refused to let the aircraft stay on Indian soil for long, fearing a commando operation. Indian officials, including the Crisis Management Group, debated storming the plane, but ultimately decided against it, waiting instead for the National Security Guard's commandos from Delhi. This delay proved costly. As refueling was further delayed, the hijackers grew more impatient and began assaulting passengers. 2 passengers were stabbed, one of them critically. Forced to comply, Captain Sharan took off, heading towards Lahore once again. This time, Pakistan's ATC allowed the plane to land, but only after realizing the aircraft was on the verge of crashing due to low fuel. Runway lights were hastily turned on as the Airbus descended in near darkness. However, Pakistani authorities provided minimal assistance, allowing only refueling and refusing medical aid for the injured passengers. The hijackers showed no mercy, insisting the plane take off immediately after refueling. The journey continued as the hijackers directed the captain to fly to Kabul, Afghanistan. But with no night landing facilities available at Kabul, the flight was diverted to Dubai. In Dubai, the UAE authorities facilitated the release of some sick and injured passengers, including the body of Rupin Katyal, a young passenger who had succumbed to his injuries. His wife, Neerja, unaware of his death, remained on board. Despite India's request for assistance, the UAE refused to allow commandos to storm the plane. After refueling in Dubai, the plane took off again, this time heading to Kandahar, Afghanistan, which was under the control of the Taliban. The exhausted passengers, many of them traumatized, awaited their uncertain fate. Upon landing in Kandahar, armed Taliban personnel surrounded the plane, ostensibly to protect it from an Indian commando operation. However, the hijackers found allies among the Taliban who facilitated their demands. The chief demand of the hijackers was the release of Maulana Masood Azhar, the commander of the Harkat-ul Mujahideen, along with Omar Sheikh and Mushtaq Ahmed Zargar. These were highly dangerous terrorists held in Indian prisons. Additionally, they demanded a ransom of $200 million and the release of 25 other prisoners. Indian negotiators, along with disguised commandos, were flown to Kandahar to handle the situation. The negotiations dragged on for hours, with no immediate breakthrough. The Taliban mediated to reduce the demands, but the situation inside the plane worsened. With power outages and unbearable heat, the passengers' misery intensified. Overwhelmed by the deteriorating conditions, the Indian government reluctantly agreed to the release of the 3 terrorists in exchange for the hostages. On December 31st, 1999, after a week-long ordeal, the terrorists were handed over to the hijackers in Kandahar. The passengers and crew were finally released and flown back to India on a special plane. At New Delhi's Indira Gandhi International Airport, the hostages received a hero's welcome, but the scars of the hijacking would remain with them forever. The consequences of the IC-814 hijacking were far-reaching. Maulana Masood Azhar went on to establish the Jaish-e-Mohammed, a terrorist organization responsible for numerous attacks in India, including the 2001 Indian Parliament attack. Omar Sheikh became a key financier for Muhammad Atta, one of the masterminds of the 9/11 attacks in the United States. Mushtaq Ahmed Zargar revived his terrorist activities in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. For India, the hijacking was a wake-up call. Aviation security underwent significant reforms. The Central Industrial Security Force was tasked with airport security, sky marshals were deployed on flights, and cockpit doors were reinforced to prevent forced entry. Secondary ladder point checks and advanced baggage screening technologies were introduced to enhance passenger safety. The hijacking of IC-814 remains a stark reminder of the vulnerabilities of aviation security and the devastating impact of terrorism. Flight into Fear, the book written by Captain D.V. Sharan on IC-814 hijacking, clearly explains the terrifying experience of violence, starvation, and constant threat of death faced by those on board. To get your copy, simply click the link below this video. Thank you.